You may have heard the legend that the Spanish conquered the Aztecs with only 500 soldiers. It sounds insane, right? But what if I told you it's actually even crazier? The Aztecs weren't just defeated by swords and cannons. Their fall began with an ancient prophecy. Disease played a huge role. A key leader actually switched sides. And there were betrayals, blunders, and body counts so high they changed history forever. Welcome to my channel. Today we're diving deep into the real story of how the Aztec Empire went from unrivaled power to total annihilation in just 2 years. Now let's get into the action. Imagine it's 1519 and you're standing on the shores of a shallow Mexican inlet. Before you sprawls the dazzling capital of the Aztec Empire, Tenochtitlan, a city made of canals and causeways, lined with towering temples, bustling marketplaces, and palaces fit for gods. Here, merchants hawk precious metals and jewels, priests chant to sacred idols, and the emperor, Moctezuma II, rules like a living deity. He owns most of central Mexico and many surrounding states. His armies are undefeated. His treasures are legendary. This is the peak of the Aztec Empire, one of the largest, most powerful civilizations in the world. Yet in 2 years, it will be completely destroyed. So what happens next? Well, that's where our story begins. A small fleet of ships arrives carrying about 500 Spanish soldiers, led by conquistador Hernán Cortés. Now, Cortés wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't have permission to conquer the Aztecs. He actually meant to explore and maybe find some gold. But when he got there, he decided to just take the whole city. And to make sure no one turned back, he ordered his ships burned. You see, Cortés had ambition burning in his veins, and he planned to use the wealth of the New World to get himself rich and famous in Spain. When Moctezuma first heard about the Spaniards coming, he thought they might be the return of the god Quetzalcoatl. Legend said Quetzalcoatl would come again from the east, pale-skinned, bearded, arriving by water. Cortés and his soldiers looked exactly like that. So Moctezuma was very cautious. He didn't want to offend a god. At first, he sent gifts of gold and food, but when Cortés kept asking for more, Moctezuma became suspicious. He grew up hearing stories about fierce warriors from far-off Cathay who wore helmets shaped like jaguars, wielded weapons of lightning, and used poisonous flowers as weapons. Maybe these pale-skinned, bearded men were no god, but a dangerous enemy. Still, he wanted to avoid war. Cortés showed up in Tenochtitlan in November 1519 with only about 500 soldiers, 16 horses, a few cannons, and a handful of crossbows. The Aztecs outnumbered them 20-1. But Moctezuma worried that this force might be magic. Why else would they march inland without food or water? He didn't know Cortés had bribed a local chieftain to supply him with provisions. He also didn't know Cortés had gathered thousands of enemies of the Aztecs along the way, especially the Tlaxcalans, a powerful tribe the Aztecs had oppressed for years. By the time Cortés reached the capital, he had thousands of soldiers. Moctezuma was trapped between admiration and fear. He invited Cortés to stay in the royal palace and showered him with gifts of gold and silver. But the Spanish conquistador refused to leave his saddle. From his horse, he demanded the city surrender, and that's when things got weird. Soon after, Cortés summoned Moctezuma to meet him at the Spanish fort. The emperor rode in on a golden litter carried by servants. Cortés rose from his saddle to greet him. Moctezuma was impressed. The Spaniards were tall, strong, and well-armed. But then came the ceremony. According to legend, Cortés had Moctezuma kneel before him and swear loyalty to the King of Spain. Then he cut off the emperor's elaborate garments to dress him in coarse Spanish clothes. Whether that really happened or not, what's certain is that soon after, Cortés imprisoned Moctezuma in his own house, turning guest into jailer. The emperor lived under guard, forced to swear loyalty to the King of Spain and pay tribute to the Spaniards. After that, Cortés took the throne for himself. That was a humiliating collapse of divine authority. And the people noticed. Tensions grew until Cortés left town for a few weeks to deal with a rival Spanish force, and that proved to be a fatal mistake. On the night of March 1520, Cortés's men attacked and killed dozens of Aztec nobles during the Festival of the Dead. It was a sacred holiday when the Aztecs believed the barriers between the worlds were thinnest, allowing spirits to walk among the living. The people were horrified. They blamed Montezuma's betrayal. Riots erupted. Spaniards fled to their fort for safety. The next day, Cortés returned to find the city in chaos. People stormed the fort, but couldn't get in. When news spread that Moctezuma was inside, angry mobs turned on him, stoning him to death. Some say he was killed by the Aztecs. Others say Cortés's men murdered him. We don't know for sure. The Aztecs dragged the conquistadors out of the fort and fought them through the streets of Tenochtitlan. Spaniards fell, but so did countless Aztecs. Those who survived fled into the jungle. By nightfall, the streets were slick with blood. When Cortés regrouped with his men, only 400 were able to fight. Disease had already taken a heavy toll. About 100 Spaniards were too sick to continue and died in Mexico. Realizing they were outmatched, Cortés and his men retreated to the coast. But that desperate flight became known as La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows. Hundreds died, including one of Cortés's top commanders. Another Spaniard wrote of the scene. They floated on the water wrapped in cotton mantles like rule. Context. Corpses clogged the canals. The victors suffered worse losses than if they'd been defeated. And Cortés dreamed of revenge. Before he left, he had ordered his ships burned, leaving the soldiers with no way to escape. If they wanted to go home, they'd have to walk across Mexico, and that journey cost many lives. Exhaustion, hunger, and thirst drained the soldiers, making them easy prey for disease. Smallpox, measles, and influenza ravaged the survivors, killing another 100 or more. Those who did recover nursed wounds and infections picked up on the road. Many never fully healed and died young, victims of the New World. When Cortés made it back to Tenochtitlan, the city was reeling from the loss of life and food. Starvation stalked the streets, and there was more misery to come. Cortés wrote to the governor of Cuba for supplies, but instead of aid, he got orders to join forces with another expedition. Still, he found allies among the indigenous tribes who hated the Aztecs. Then he laid siege to Tenochtitlan, cutting off food and fresh water. The Aztecs held out for 75 days, but starvation weakened their resolve. By July, many people had died. Survivors clamored to surrender, but Cortés wanted complete submission. He forced the remaining Aztec leaders to carry him around on a golden litter like Moctezuma and paraded them through the streets. That humiliation pushed the Emperor Cuitlahuac to try to escape in a canoe, but the Spanish captured him and put him on trial. On August 13, 1521, the last emperor of the Aztec Empire met the same fate as Moctezuma. First, he was stripped of his finery. Then he knelt before his captors. Cortés dressed him in coarse clothes, pulled a rough rope around his neck, and yanked it tight. The Aztecs had fallen. What followed was erasure. Spaniards tore down temples, built churches on their ruins, and filled those churches with treasures looted from the Aztecs. They enslaved many of the surviving Aztecs and forced them to work in mines or on plantations growing food for Spain. In the end, the Spaniards buried Tenochtitlan beneath Mexico City. Over the centuries, they lost interest in the old ways. But when archaeologists uncovered Aztec artifacts in the 18th century, people started paying attention. Today, historians study the Aztecs to learn about their achievements, and people around the world celebrate their resilience. So yeah, it's a lot more complicated than just 500 guys taking over an empire. The Aztecs didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because of perfect storms. A brilliant but superstitious emperor, a ruthless invader with superior technology, deadly disease, and hundreds of thousands of oppressed allies ready to help tear the empire down. So yeah, you can't blame it on one thing. It was kind of all of the above.